G'day everybody, it's Dave from Wing Chun Mind Force. In this episode I'm coming full circle in talking about wisdom from my very first Sifu, a fantastic Australian martial artist called Lawrence Lee. Now we're going away back here, we're talking about the mid-70s. I was a 17-year-old, just left school. I think I might have been in school actually when I first saw Lawrence Lee, but 75 in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, was like the second wave of Bruce Lee fever. I think, I'm pretty sure that Bruce Lee's movies came out in about 72 or 73, caused a big sensation, but as often happens, it tended to be a bit of a cult, small group, and then in 75 the movies just hit, I guess, worldwide. It had become such a phenomenon. All the cinemas wanted to know about it, all the newspapers, everybody wanted to know about Bruce Lee, Kung Fu, this far out Chinese martial art. So I first watched Kwai Chang Caine, the TV series Kung Fu, and then I saw Bruce's, the first Bruce movie I saw was The Big Boss, which in Australia we call The Chinese Connection. And I was absolutely hooked. And then, because we didn't have video back then, we certainly didn't have the internet, there was a TV series, a documentary came out called Kung Fu Killers. And at the same time, or just after that, there was another one called The World of Kung Fu. Now, it's hard now to understand what a sensation these things were, but everybody saw it. You just didn't have a million channels to choose from. You had 4, and one of them was the ABC, which was more for grown-ups. And this World of Kung Fu and Kung Fu Killers got everyone really hyped, and of course this helped the people to go to Bruce Lee movies, and it was a whole industry with books and magazines and all sorts of things. And martial arts clubs really thrived back then, and we were more a macho generation. We were really blokey, we weren't ashamed to be men. We were really into being tough guys, and so it was a big hit. Now, there's a lot of people responsible for those 2 docos, but the main Kung Fu master, who was a guy who really looked like Bruce Lee, lived in Sydney, and this was Lawrence Lee. Now, he didn't just look like Bruce Lee because he was Chinese. He was a tough, fit, smaller Chinese guy with a cool Bruce Lee haircut, wore the clothes, talked the talk, walked the walk. So a couple of years ago, these are just lost in the mists of time for so many years, and then a couple of years ago The Man from Hong Kong came out on DVD, and it was an Aussie Kung Fu movie, and I bought the DVD, and on the end of the DVD was this Kung Fu Killers show. So it was Bruce, this amazing, totally gutsy Australian stuntman interviewing Kung Fu masters in Hong Kong, and he comes back and interviews Lawrence Lee in Sydney, and they're training down near the harbour, and Lawrence is telling him what Kung Fu's about, and he says to him, this is our way of fighting. He calls it. He says there's 2 ways. He says there's the indifferent attitude and the emotional attitude to fighting. So I'm just going to play that clip for you now, and then I'll have a bit of a chat about it.
Types of mental attitudes of fighting. The first one being the indifferent attitude. The second one being the emotional attitude of fighting. Now, in the indifferent attitude of fighting, we do not accept the existence of the opponent. As far as we are concerned, all we are doing is just being there and doing our techniques perfect. And in doing so, in not registering that the opponent is there, our limbs would travel further and penetrate much more into the opponent rather than accepting his existence and therefore put an automatic subconscious block to it. We, in our indifferent attitude of fighting, do not have any time for fear. There is no emotion involved, mainly a pure objective type of attitude. No time for pain, no time for fear. It's just a blank look. Instead of viewing at the opponent, we view just slightly away from the opponent so as to catch the overall picture of the whole form.
Okay, that was pretty cool and retro, wasn't it? Now, I don't think I mentioned this, but I started training with Lawrence Lee at that time. With him personally, I only really trained one day. He did this amazing demonstration in Brisbane. About 100 people came. It was really cool. We'd never seen anybody like him. And there was some young guys mocking up the back, and I suspect they might have been hardcore karate guys, but they're obviously there to go, oh, bullshit, Wing Chun, Wing Chun, Kung Fu is weak, Japanese are strong. So that was a bit of a thing that used to go on back then. So Lawrence Lee said, I'm going to give a bit of a demo of kicking power, and does anyone who want to be the test dummies? So I can't remember whether these guys said yes, or he said, oh, how about you fellas up the back? And big young fellas. They all swagger down. And it's really like out of a Kung Fu movie. They sort of swagger down like, yeah, this little Chinese guy is going to have no force. They could have been black belts for all I know, but he gives one of them this big chunk of foam, and then he says, you stand there, and your friends, yeah, just get back a bit, you go 6 feet behind him, you go another 3 feet. And none of us had seen this sort of thing before. We hadn't seen Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch or anything like that, so we weren't quite sure what was going to happen. And Lawrence was about an arm's length from this guy, and he's looking at us, he's explaining about the Kung Fu kick, and then he just went pow, and it's this perfect side kick, but the guy lifted off the ground, flew into the guy behind him, crashed into the guy behind him, and these three braggots were sort of on the floor. And I can assure you that they weren't noisy or disruptive after that. They all meekly got up and sat down and just went, whoa. And I wish I still had it, but I remember going and looking at the piece of foam, and I guess Lawrence had a Adidas Roam or whatever the cool shoes, Adidas Roam was a really cool thing to wear then. And there was this deeply imprinted sole of a boot in this bit of foam that impressed me. So he ended up deciding that he couldn't afford to come up to Brisbane. There was not enough people actually signed up, so I started training with his student, Tony Aston. That's another story. But let's just quickly look at what Lawrence talks about in that clip. He says, in the indifferent attitude of fighting, we do not accept the existence of the opponent. As far as we're concerned, all we are doing is just being there and doing our techniques perfect. Now, when I saw this again, it blew my mind, because that's actually a really high level understanding of Wing Chun. And it's what we do in Wing Chun. We do not accept the existence of the opponent. All we are doing is just being there and doing our techniques as if there's no one there. Now, Albert Chong, our most senior practitioner in Australia, who started with my Sifu back in 1972, trained heaps with Sigong Chu Shon Ten, great man, great guy. He said to me, I was asking him about this Mo Gyul Mo Sik, which is a saying Sigong said, which means no form, no technique. I've actually got it on here. I think I've got it upside down though, it's a bit embarrassing, but I think I've got Mo Sik, Mo Gyul. Anyway, he looked at it means no form, no tech, but Albert said to me, what it really means is the opponent's not there. There's no one there. You just move as if there's no one there. Right, now Lawrence says next, In doing so and not registering the opponent is there, the limbs will travel further and penetrate much more into the opponent, rather than accepting his existence and therefore putting the automatic subconscious block to it. Now, this is what blows me out. It took me 40 years to sort of rediscover this stuff that he said there on that Kung Fu Killers doco. That subconscious block, when you know the person's there, that's why it doesn't matter how relaxed you are, if you're punching a Wing Chun bag or any kind of bag, right at the last moment, you block your subconscious because your mind thinks I'm going to hit. And I've talked about this in my How to Make Your Punch Go Wang video. It's always that last instant when you don't hit. And one of my friends who commented on my last video, on the video before last, said, can you talk a bit about placing? And I'll make a video about it, but it's the essence of the idea of placing is to not change and not put any force into your strike, and especially right at the end. You know, you can be super soft if you just, that bit of mental tension at the end robs it of its power. But if you can hit as if there's no one there, there's no subconscious block, what that other person feels, or what the bag feels, is all your weight. Boom, and it hits like a knife. It's not like a thump. It actually penetrates deeply like some kind of super sharp thing. Extremely interesting. Lawrence goes on to say, we, in our indifferent attitude of fighting, do not have any time for fear. There is no emotion involved. We have mainly a pure, objective type of attitude. Now, this is something people talk about a lot. Like, oh yeah, you can do this soft style kung fu, but what do you do in a real fight on the street, mate? And some guy's calling you all sorts of F words and words with other letters, and telling you what he's going to do to you. Fear comes into it. Now, it's easy enough to say don't have fear, but that's what we train to do, is to be clinical, to have no emotion. You're indifferent. Now, the last conference I went to, Australian Wing Chun Federation, we had a bit of a talk about, they call it duress, you know, how to train people to get used to being under the pressure of somebody going to thump the crap out of them. It's a tough one. I've had a bit of a rough life. I've had a really nice life, but I've also been involved in, you know, fighting since I was a kid. I just couldn't avoid bullies coming and fighting me as an adult. You know, I worked in security and other areas where I had to confront people. So you sort of get inoculated by being involved in, you know, emergency services, security, or if you're just a bit of a roughie and you're hanging around rough streets, you get used to the mouthing and the threats. And a lot of it is just bullshit. It's not really going to turn into a fight. It's the quiet ones you got to watch out for, the one who doesn't, you know, like the dude who just comes. He's got something in his pocket, he's got his hand in his pocket, that's the one to run away from, because he's got a shiv, or, you know, who knows, where he might actually be able to throw a really hard punch and hit the target. But that's part of the meditation of Wing Chun, the Sun Im Dao state, not conscious mind, is to be able to go into that state and it becomes like a dance. It's clinical. You don't allow yourself to get emotion. You just go about it like you're not a robot, but like a surgeon cutting out a cancer. You know, it's sort of like that. Now he says, you have no time for pain, no time for fear, just a blank look. That's not hard to do. You know, a lot of us get around with a bit of a blank look. But he says, instead of viewing the opponent, we view just slightly away from the opponent so as to capture the overall picture of the whole form. Now, I'll finish off with this, but this is something I'm really big on, and something, if you watch Bruce Lee's movies, he always, you know, he doesn't look at the dudes. It's hard to do with glasses. If I was going to fight, I'd take my glasses off. Not just so they wouldn't call me Four Eyes, but it doesn't matter to me if things are a bit blurry. I can still see them. But say, you know, you're the bad guy. I don't look at you because my conscious mind focuses on you. I look off and I see you with my peripheral vision. I can still hit it. Even from there, boom, I can still see you. Even from there, I can still see the camera. I can still just see it there. It's sort of pretty much, you know, 90 degrees from me. I can still see out my eye. So when you do that, you use that vision right around, and you take it in sort of impersonally. It becomes just a sort of a game, and you allow your instincts to open up and see what's going on, and you'll see attacks coming, you'll see movement, and you'll just respond to it. Fighting's actually, real fights happen super quick, and if you live a very peaceful life most of the time, a fight's a really different thing, you know, like if you ever go to a zoo and see the monkeys hop into each other or see a vicious dog fight, you realise how civilised you've become, how soft, how unwild you are. Or if you meet somebody that, you know, has come from a whole different world to you, where people are fighting a lot, there's a lot of aggression, you just sort of know, like, oh, I'm not in that space, you know. I'm always thinking about what will happen. Will I go to jail? You know, will the police get me? Whereas some people don't even think about stuff like that. They just walk around looking for a fight, ready to fight. Who cares if they go to jail? It doesn't enter their mind. So, yeah, this ability to be dispassionate is a good thing. Miyamoto Musashi, the great Japanese swordsman who wrote the Gorin no Sho, Book of Five Rings, he actually talks about cultivating this peripheral vision and doing it a lot. You're walking around not just looking at stuff but seeing all this out here. So I'm going to leave you with this idea. Just if you put your hands out like this, put your fingers up, bring your fingers to the middle, and then don't look at them but just sort of see them. Look straight ahead. Keep looking straight ahead and just see when you lose them. So it's pretty incredible. I can still, believe it or not, that's sort of like a little bit behind my eyes, but I can still just see something. There's just a little smudge of sort of tan when I come to there, which is pretty much straight out 90 degrees. I can see those fingers. So, you know, it's a consciousness thing. Alright, so that was a bit of a long one. If you made it to the end, thanks very much for your concentration. I appreciate it. I assume that some people only watch a couple of minutes of my video and skip to something else. I know that the ones who are like me, who are really keen and just dying to get good at this art and, you know, prepared to spend hours standing waiting for the tansao to move or whatever, will be watching now. So thank you for your dedication, and I look forward to seeing you next time.